Hello everybody, Ninja-Trix here, and welcome to the next episode of the Off Topic Podcast. Today we will be talking about writers and just a kind of brief look over of what we think makes their books so good. Let's go!
3, 2, 1, let's jump. Yeah, we really are getting off topic, huh?
Oh, yeah, that's the name of the podcast. That's the point of this. Let's go. So, when it comes to writing, every time a book comes out, there's obviously someone behind it. Whether it be artificial intelligence making the weirdest kind of fever dream you've ever read, or someone who doesn't know how to writing things in a very confusing fashion, or a person who actually knows how to write words, which you can then legibly understand. So today's episode is on writers, our favorite writers, and why we like them. So one author that I have read a lot of books by, James Patterson, he created the Daniel X series of books, and that was like my favorite series of books when I was younger. I went and I read every single one. In fact, I was like asking for the next book in the series, and the series did not disappoint. I did think that it ended well, although there was some weird stuff they implemented towards the end that kind of left a few questions in my head, like, why did this happen? But then also, I just kind of laid back and I'm like, okay. And there's a lot of fun jokes and kind of just little playful things in it. It's a very lighthearted series, and I think that works to its benefit.
I mean, it's a slightly edgier bedtime from what I remember.
I mean, in a way, I suppose, because he is a kid who has the ability to transform himself into other things, although he has more the power of imagination. So it has the whole teach kids to use their imagination kind of thing going behind it, which makes sense, because I do believe it was a Scholastic series. Scholastic has published more books than I know. It's ridiculous.
I mean, they're definitely the leading publisher of children's books. There's nobody that really competes with them.
Yeah,
as far as just sheer volume or quality as much.
Well, they have a lot of good ones, but they also have a lot of bad ones. I will say they have the best quality, period, from what I've seen, but they also have a ton of stinkers. But yeah, like Scholastic, they did basically, if you had a childhood of good children's books, there's at least like 20 Scholastics in there somewhere. But yeah, having read all 6 Daniel X series, they definitely were a favorite of mine. I thought the concept was pretty neat, where he has literally unlimited power, and instead of just retiring, because he totally could, he ends up going and trying to become responsible. He summons fictitious versions of his parents to help him just kind of live in society. And I won't spoil, but there's some extra stuff to it that's pretty interesting. It's a good series. And I've also read some of the other stuff James Patterson has done. I think I tried reading Witch and Wizard, but couldn't get past like the first page. So that's kind of sad. But I did read Maximum Ride, at least the first full book, and then I went and read the manga, and I also enjoyed that quite a bit.
I'm fairly excited that most of James Patterson, especially his YA stuff, is ghostwritten. I don't have any evidence to point this off of, but he writes too much stuff.
Well, that could also explain how his ideas and concepts all seem to be pretty good, but stylistically, his Maximum Ride series is vastly different from the Daniel X series. Like, I went and read the Daniel X, basically books back to back to back, and I went through all 6 books, no trouble. but I found Maximum Ride kind of a slog to get through, which I thought was funny given Maximum Ride was more popular than Daniel X. I honestly don't know what that was for. Although Daniel X received a video game that was supposed to be okay versus Maximum Ride receiving a movie that was an abomination with, no budget. Evidently, no one cared.
Yeah, I mean, if they want to, make it based off of a Hulk film, they should have gone for the one with the really ugly big brain. There's a Hulk villain called Abomination. He's the villain in the Hulk movie, but the only Hulk movie in the MCU.
Yes. Wait, that's what he was? He was called Abomination?
That's what he's called in the comics. I don't know if they called him.
I don't remember what they called him in the movie. I actually did enjoy watching the Incredible Hulk movie, but I will say it's just okay. It was good. It did not feel like an MCU film. It felt very different. Although some of the earlier MCU films are a little all over the place. After Guardians of the Galaxy came out, everything kind of tried to piggyback a bit off of its success and add a little bit more humor to it. Which, it's welcome, especially compared to the DC Comics, their whatever they're doing with their sandpaper.
You don't love the cinematic, the masterful scene of Martha? That's getting off topic, though. Weren't we talking about writers?
We're supposed to be talking about writers. Very much off topic. But, in summary, I think that James Patterson, I've enjoyed his writings. And even though I didn't enjoy the Maximum Ride book that much, the manga adaptation, which had the same concept but different execution, I actually found a lot better and was able to get through it. And technically, it's the same series, it's the same story, it's just presented in a different way, like through the lens of a different author, which I thought was really neat, being able to read that. Although they've been stuck at 9 volumes, I don't know that they've done anything else past that. Still wondering if they're ever going to do another one. Now, I already know the answer to this, but what's your favorite author?
Sir Terry Pratchett.
I knew it. I knew it. So, what do you think makes Terry Pratchett's books good?
He has a very unique voice. It's almost like having a conversation with a friend. A rather strange, slightly drunk friend, but brilliant nonetheless. Sometimes his voice is very wildly depending on the book or the character. The drunkenness is very much a symptom of his more city-based guards things. It really makes you feel like you're talking with a drunk city guard.
That's kind of an interesting way to look at it. Like, what I liked about the James Patterson books, I noticed they're all written in first person from the perspective of the protagonist, as if they were recounting their adventures, but in real time. Although sometimes it's in the past tense. It kind of depends on the scenario, but
present tense is usually very frowned upon.
Yeah, but but I still thought that the James Patterson books, they all had that similar style to them from the ones that I've read, as well as a similar concept. And then the Terry Pratchett books, most of them are from the Discworld series, so that same overarching magic, and then he always has comedy in all of his writings.
I don't know. I don't know if it's in all of them. There wasn't much comedy in Nation.
Well, from what I've read of Pratchett or seen, it's comedic. At the very least, Discworld is all comedic, even if not everything Pratchett writes is actually comedic.
Oh, Discworld is comedic even when it's dark and existential.
Like Mort, which is probably one of the best ones. I think Hogfather is what most people agree is the best of the books.
Oh, there's no agreement about which is peak Pratchett. I'd say Hogfather is my favorite film adaptation of Pratchett's work, but as far as his best book, a lot of people would say the Guards series are the best. The Guards, and the Witches are some of the his most well explored characters. Everything he does is pretty great. Some of I think the Rincewind books are probably, if I have to pick a least favorite of Pratchett's sub-series of Discworld, I'd go with Rincewind.
Well, isn't he basically just a bumbling idiot who has immortality?
He's not an idiot per se, so much as not the kind of hero one would normally...
Like, not an idiot intellectually. He knows things, but he's kind of a little... He doesn't seem to be the brightest, but because of a magic spell, he's basically immortal, and so we're with this guy, we know he can't die, so none of the scenarios he's in can actually have any, like, serious bearing. Although it does get to a point where the Grim Reaper, he's just there, and he's like, I just don't even care anymore. He basically gives up on trying to get Rincewind after just realizing this guy will not die. I thought that was funny.
Oh, yes. Rincewind, I would say I'd much rather read lower tier Pratchett than the higher tier most other writers.
How would you say the writing style of Pratchett really affects the books? Like, do you think that they'd still be good if the dialogue were identical and the events that happened were identical, but like the way they were said maybe was different?
No, not at all. I think Pratchett's prose is one of his major prose.
The prose is his pro. Oh, that's fun.
The way he writes the dialogue and the characters is nothing else. There's nothing else quite like it. Nothing can really capture it. He's a one-of-a-kind writer. There'll be no new Pratchett. He's one of the great writers of our time. With his passing, a literary giant has passed.
Yeah, like, from what I've heard, none of his books are really bad, although he has said the first two Rincewind novels were not the best.
Yes, Equal Rights is the book he said was the first Discworld where he was satisfied with the story.
Was that the third Rincewind?
It was the first of the Witches, sort of. And then it introduces the Witches, but they're not really the main characters. It mainly focuses on a little girl who becomes the first female wizard.
Oh, that's cool.
And if before you ask what are the witches are not wizards. That would be a foolish question if you had intended.
Well, the wizards, from what I'm aware, it's kind of like a group of scholarly people who practice magic within an academy and everything.
You're either born a wizard or not a wizard on the Discworld, but if you're a wizard, you can't go making babies.
So they just basically will walk out and see if you've been born with magical abilities?
Oh, it's the 8th son of an 8th son.
What does it even mean?
Well, it's a
so if you're the 8th son born and then you have 8 children, then there will be a wizard. Okay, I just had to process that because that was weird.
Well, the 7th son of the 7th son is often seen to be a magical thing. But 8 is the magical number on the Discworld, so...
What, do they have 7-sided dice?
No.
You're going to have a headache trying to calculate that in your brain.
Honey, you can't be, but neither can Octarine.
Discworld's full of a lot of things that wouldn't make sense. Like, physics-wise, if you were to have a flat world... When you would get closer and closer to the edges, gravity would become so, like, pressing against you, you would slide towards the center. You literally couldn't stand upright. But if you were closer towards the center of that flat Earth, the force would be so strong, you'd be crushed under your own weight. So, when we can disprove with physics that the Earth is... We can say the Earth is not flat with physics, because if it were flat, only a small ring would be a survivable area. And we'd have houses that would need to be built basically sideways. Otherwise, gravity would just cause people to fall out and everything.
I suppose.
I thought that's interesting. You calculate that with the whole physics equations. Earth is flat. The center of mass is the center of that flat square. That's going to cause some serious problems. It just would not work. But Discworld, they just throw that all out there like, we're on a disc, boys. Let's have fun. And have fun they do.
Unless you're poor, or a troll, or a poor troll.